Over the years, the fantasy community has gotten a lot sharper. We have so much more information these days, but we don't always get it right. And in fact, sometimes with certain players, the narrative, it goes too far. We got 10 players that we think the community right now is dead wrong about, and we want to let you know the truth. And that includes some big name running backs who are going very early in drafts.
Yeah, I think everybody is absolutely dead wrong about Breece Hall right now. All we have heard this entire offseason since Aaron Glenn came into town is this is going to be a committee, and it's only gotten stronger and stronger as the preseason has gone on and we've gotten closer to the actual season, actual NFL games. Yet somehow Breece Hall is still being drafted as the consensus RB15 off the board. He's going ahead of guys like Kenneth Walker, Chuba Hubbard, James Conner, just to name a few. I mean, these guys are guys we know are the number one running backs on their teams in good offenses with very little competition for touches when healthy. And what we're hearing from Aaron Glenn right now is this is going to be a David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs situation with Braylon Allen and Breece Hall. And we might even get Isaiah Davis sprinkled in as well. And look, hearing something like, oh, Breece Hall in the Jahmyr Gibbs role might get you excited until you remember that this is Breece Hall and the Jets, not Jahmyr Gibbs and the Lions. Look, the Jets I don't think are going to be the worst offense in the NFL, but they're probably not going to be as good or fantasy friendly as the Lions offense has been the last couple of years. And one thing when you look at Jahmyr Gibbs, it's not just the explosiveness, which Breece Hall has as well. It's not the pass catching, which, yeah, Breece Hall has that as well. It's the touchdowns. 20 touchdowns last year for Jahmyr Gibbs. How many rushing touchdowns are the Jets even going to have this year? And not only that, out of those rushing touchdowns, how many are Justin Fields going to take? And when they get near the goal line, do we really think they're going to go to Breece Hall over 240-pound Braylon Allen? I don't think so. Look, Breece Hall will probably be okay this year because of his pass catching and his explosiveness, but you don't just want okay at running back 15, especially when there's good running backs, workhorse running backs still on the board after Breece Hall. I know Breece Hall, it's like the talent is there. We have such high expectations for Breece Hall, but sometimes you just got to look at what's in front of you and look at the reality of the situation. And the situation is not going to be great for Breece Hall this year. I think everybody's dead wrong on Breece Hall. He needs to be even lower in rankings.
All right, I've got an early running back that I think is being faded maybe a little bit too much, especially by some experts. All right, so we all expect James Cook is going to have some regression. Negative regression, that is, especially because of the touchdowns. And, sure, you hear it all the time, and we say it all the time. Touchdowns are not a sticky stat. They're not reliable year after year. A guy who scores a ton of touchdowns is not guaranteed to do it again the following year. So James Cook last year, 18 touchdowns, 16 of them on the ground. That's like Derrick Henry type stuff. But James Cook is not Derrick Henry, all right? And so this seems maybe a little like an outlier, right? He's going to come crashing hard. So why would you draft him so early? Well, I'll tell you why. Because he's still going to score a lot of touchdowns, even if he regresses pretty hard. Let's say that 16 comes down to 10. There are only 10 running backs that scored 10 touchdowns or more, and that puts him in the top 10 in scoring. And on the other hand, you know what? He is still pretty reliable as a rusher. He doesn't get the most volume. We all understand that, right? They use sort of a mix of other players. Ray Davis is solid. Ty Johnson will come in on third downs. But they just paid James Cook, if you recall. A lot of people are also worried about the holdout or hold in, whichever one it was. All right, they paid him. They're going to use him, right? I would be sweating it if they weren't. This was lingering throughout the season. Okay, then I would be out, at least mostly out. But I'm in because the Bills are in on him. They're going to give him more touches. He's said as part of this, not just that he wants more money, he wants to be used more in the passing game. He doesn't want to come out on third downs for Ty Johnson, right? He wants to be that goal line back. They're going to do that, right? I'm not saying he's going to be all of a sudden a bell cow. That's not going to happen. And sure, Josh Allen still exists. But as we have to keep reminding people, those teams that have rushing quarterbacks who score a lot of touchdowns also happen to have running backs that score a lot as well because of the way the goal line offense is designed. Just think, Derrick Henry's got Lamar Jackson, right? Josh Allen has not stolen any touchdowns from James Cook, clearly, and Saquon Barkley was definitely not hurt by playing with Jalen Hurts. So if you get the message here, he will still score plenty of touchdowns. This guy rushes for 4.9 yards per carry for his career, just like he did last year. So he makes up for a lack of volume he puts into it with efficiency. Don't fade him. He's going to be just as valuable as last year. All right, now it's time to talk about some exciting young receivers.
Well, I don't know if we can consider Jalen Waddle exciting these days, but I've been resisting talking about Jalen Waddle, although my gut keeps telling me, like, you need to start talking about Jalen Waddle. I get it. Jalen Waddle, like, really, the last couple of years been a huge disappointment in real life, in fantasy, but I think it's gotten out of hand this year. He's going over 40 picks after Tyreek Hill. Look how disappointing Tyreek Hill was last year. I mean, he was not just disappointing, he was an absolute bust last year for where you drafted him. A wide receiver over the age of 30 who had significant drop-offs across the board. We just don't see wide receivers like that bounce back. But even if you think Tyreek Hill is going to bounce back to some degree, you're telling me Tyreek Hill is worth an early third-round pick. Jalen Waddle is only worth like a 7th, 8th-round pick in this offense, which, by the way, lost their number 2 target in Jonnu Smith. He's going to get the targets. The targets are going to be there. Look, we may not see the Jalen Waddle we expected to see or hoped to see after his first 2 years in the league. And Tua may not be one of those guys who airs it out like we saw early in his career because they're scared of the concussion. But I think the targets are going to be there enough for Jalen Waddle to at least make him fantasy relevant. And it wouldn't surprise me if he's actually better than Tyreek Hill this year, or at least very close to Tyreek Hill. So why is Jalen Waddle going 40 picks later? Why are we so confident in Tyreek Hill and just completely out on Jalen Waddle? This doesn't make sense to me. These guys should be going closer in drafts, and to be honest, Tyreek Hill should probably be going lower. Jalen Waddle maybe slightly higher. But regardless of that, Jalen Waddle is the guy I'm starting to come around on in this offense as far as wide receivers go. I think we're just too low on Jalen Waddle this year. No, I don't expect a huge year from Jalen Waddle, but I think he's going to be solid, and I think if you draft him here, you're going to be happy you did it.
Well, unfortunately, I can't say I got the same vibe from Marvin Harrison Jr. You know, what everyone just assumes is it's year 2, he's going to take that leap forward, right? He built up some strength in the offseason, you know, the chemistry. It's just natural that a guy gets better, right, when he gets more experience. But why? I mean, just because? There's got to be something more to it. And so here's the thing. I like Marvin Harrison Jr. I think he's a great prospect. I think he could be an elite receiver, even in fantasy. I just don't know if he can do it right here, right now in this offense. Because let's face it, I think it's not really more of a Harrison problem as it is a Kyler Murray problem. And so here's the thing. Nothing has changed here, right? It's the exact same offense in every way, right? He didn't get more or less target competitions. They did absolutely nothing at receiver. Okay, fine. The offensive coordinator, the quarterback, everything's the same. And so on the one hand, I just think, okay, it's going to be the same as last year, same results, all that. You can get Harrison later than you got him last year, but still, if you get this year the exact same stat line you got last year from Harrison, I think you're still going to be disappointed, especially if you expect that leap. But what has also not changed here is the leading target in this offense. It's Trey McBride. It just is. It was last year. It's still going to be this year because that's who Kyler Murray trusts. And even in the preseason, we've seen it. The highest target share, it's by far Trey McBride. And you know what? There's partly a reason for this. Kyler Murray just isn't that great at throwing the ball out wide to his wideouts. In fact, last year, he, in terms of highly accurate throws, however that's charted, to out wide receivers, Arizona was dead last. And Kyler Murray, when he was actually the quarterback, you know, for the Cardinals during that time, it was even lower. And this offense isn't exactly innovative in a lot of ways. They don't move Harrison all around a lot in different formations and motion. They just have him lining up on the line of scrimmage out wide the vast majority of the time. And so again, I think what's going to change? Why is he going to take this major step forward? And so that's why I hate to say, but based on his ADP, I'm mostly out.
Do you want to win your fantasy league but don't have time to do all the research? Are you tired of drafting mediocre teams and then having to constantly hope you hit it big on the waiver wire just to compete? Do you wish you could have a fantasy expert like Pierre or myself with you while you draft? Well, now you can. With our app Draft Lane and our live draft pilot, we will guide you through every pick of your draft and tell you exactly which players we would pick if we were on the clock. Our proprietary algorithm will take into account your league settings, scoring, and roster requirements to identify the best picks every time you are on the clock to ensure you have a winning team from week 1. It's the closest thing you can get to having us there drafting with you. Get the biggest edge in fantasy football. Just go to your app store and search for Draft Lane and download it today and get ready to dominate your draft. draft.
Or what about a promising young rookie receiver in Houston?
Yeah, I think most people are dead wrong about who the Texans' number 2 wide receiver is going to be, because for some reason, Jaden Higgins, the rookie, still being drafted ahead of Christian Kirk, even though everything we're being told by the beat writers, by the coaching staff, offense coordinators, is Christian Kirk is the number 2 wide receiver. And I don't just mean he's the number 2 wide receiver in 3 wide receiver sets in the slot. I mean, he's the number 2 wide receiver. Like, he's going to be out there the second most often of all other wide receivers, with Nico Collins obviously being the number 1 wide receiver. But here's the other thing about Jaden Higgins. It doesn't even sound like he's the number 3 wide receiver right now. It sounds like Xavier Hutchinson is actually ahead of Jaden Higgins right now for that number 3 role. Yet somehow, Jaden Higgins is still the number 2 wide receiver being drafted in this Texans offense. I've been talking up Christian Kirk for a couple weeks now, saying like, hey, this guy's a great sleeper in fantasy drafts. You got to draft him. I absolutely feel like you got to draft Christian Kirk. I think he's going to be the number 2 target, the number 2 wide receiver. You want the number 2 wide receiver in this offense. This is an offense that can support 2 wide receivers. Higgins, maybe as the season goes on, maybe second half he starts to play more. But do you really need to draft that in a redraft league, like in your typical redraft league? Think about last year, guys like a Jalen McMillan, who did nothing for the first 3 quarters of the season. Was he just chilling on somebody's bench? I mean, unless that person stopped playing and wasn't paying attention? No, probably not. He was probably dropped and put back on waiver wire. That's what's going to happen with Jaden Higgins, because he's barely going to be playing to start the season. So don't draft Jaden Higgins this year. You can always grab him off the waiver wire later in the year if he starts to come on. Instead, grab Christian Kirk. He's the number 2 wide receiver you want in Houston.
All right, now technically, Davante Adams is the number 2 receiver in LA. And I will just say this, I don't think everybody's out on him, because he still goes in the first 3 rounds typically of every fantasy draft. But the people who are out, they're very vocal about it, and they have multiple reasons. So here's what I think they're wrong about. First of all, you hear these blanket statements, which really annoy me. They're like, you just don't draft any receiver once he hits 30, right? Just like they used to say about running backs coming off a 200 touch season, or a running back who's over the age of 27, right? Until those myths are dispelled. And then what else? Oh yeah, Puka's the guy there, right? Davante Adams is definitely going to see his target share drop. And, you know, he's only good these days when Aaron Rodgers throws in the ball, right? Okay, so let me tackle each of those one by one. First of all, Davante Adams had one of his best seasons when he turned 30, right? That season a couple years ago, so it was 2022, he actually put up 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns. The next season, right after he was turning the ripe old age of 31, yeah, he did step down, only 1,144 yards and 8 touchdowns with the Raiders. All right, so last couple of years, injuries, right, trading midseason, his numbers aren't great because he just wasn't on the field a whole lot. But he's going to be on the field. He is healthy. He is fine. And if you look at his reception perception chart, he is still an elite receiver. It's almost all green, right? Everything. He can run all the routes, and his success against man coverage is in the 80th percentile. So you can't tell me this guy is dust or anywhere close to it. All right, now as far as the whole Puka thing, how is this really different from late last year? He was competing with Garrett Wilson, all right? He's played alongside other good receivers before. I am not worried about that. And you know what? It's not like Puka's held up a whole lot over the past year in terms of his health. So anyways, the other thing is, okay, Aaron Rodgers just propped him up last year. That's what a lot of people say. You know, he was just forcing him the ball. All right, sure, he probably was, but I will just say this. I will take even a bad back Matthew Stafford over Aaron Rodgers these days. And so, sure, if Stafford is just completely out, if that back does catch up to him and he's missing multiple games, I'll be a little more down on Davante Adams, but I won't be out still because, like I said, this situation is actually so much better than Davante Adams has had since he was in Green Bay. All right, now let's shift back to running back and some veterans here that some people are a little misled about.
Yeah, people must be misled about Aaron Jones because for some reason he's going 30 picks ahead of his teammate Jordan Mason in Fantasy Pros in the consensus ADP. And this makes no sense at all if you've been listening to anything that's coming out of the words from the coaches. First of all, they're saying this is going to be a relatively equal split between Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones. So that right there is like, why is one guy going 30 picks earlier? But here's the big thing. Jordan Mason is going to be the goal line back. Yeah, sure, maybe Aaron Jones has more receptions than Jordan Mason, but I'll take the guy who could potentially score 10 or more touchdowns any day of the week. That's just free 6 points right there. Not to mention, Jordan Mason was actually a better runner between the tackles last year than Aaron Jones was. So yes, Aaron Jones, he's going to be out there. He's going to get his run. He's probably going to be the preferred pass catching back, but Jordan Mason could easily be the preferred early down back, and he's certainly going to be the preferred goal line back. I know Aaron Jones was good last year. I know Aaron Jones has had a great career, many great fantasy years, and a lot of drafters probably just see the name Aaron Jones and think, hey, that's not a bad click, and they hit click. But everybody's dead wrong. Jordan Mason should be the running back going ahead of Aaron Jones. I really think Jordan Mason is going to score more fantasy points. I'm almost positive he's going to score more touchdowns than Aaron Jones, and that right there makes it worth it to me. So don't click Aaron Jones in your drafts. Let your league mates be dead wrong. Wait 30 more picks and get Jordan Mason instead.
On the flip side, a guy like DeAndre Swift, also not very exciting. This guy's been around a few years. Wasn't that great last year, kind of a bust. And so you might think, I can pass, I'll do better, I'll take a rookie or something else. But I think that would be a mistake. So here's the thing. So DeAndre Swift has been in the NFL for a few years. He's only 26 years old. This guy does not have that many carries under his belt, unlike Aaron Jones, who is now north of 30. And Swift, yeah, it was disappointing. There's no doubt. 3.8 yards per carry, not good. But as I've said before, this entire Bears offense is different. Yes, top to bottom, basically, because not only do they have a bunch of new weapons, but the offensive line, they reinforced it big time. It's now ranked as a top 10 offensive line, projected to be at least going into the season. And yes, Ben Johnson, trust me, it's going to make a huge difference. I mean, we saw how dysfunctional the coaching staff was last year. I mean, it was almost malpractice how they used or misused the weapons that they did have. And so it's going to be a different offense. And let's not forget, I don't think we can really overestimate the fact that, yes, they are reunited from their time in Detroit. And when DeAndre Swift had his most efficient season, averaging 5.5 yards per carry, it was when Ben Johnson was the OC there in Detroit. He was going to use him, and then, of course, everyone says, well, what about the Monty Gibbs thing, right? There's going to be some sort of a 1-2 punch. Except here's the thing. There is no Monty here, right? Who is it? Tell me who it's going to be that they're going to give so many more carries to besides DeAndre Swift. Rashawn Johnson? What have you heard about him this preseason? I haven't heard anything about him, really. And they were so worried about getting another second back involved that, did they sign somebody in free agency? No. Did they draft another running back? Yeah, in round 7. I'm not worried about DeAndre Swift not getting enough touches. He's going to get more volume than I think anybody even anticipates, and he's going to have possibly his best season ever. All right, enough running backs and receivers. We can't neglect the other two positions. Let's talk tight end.
Let's talk tight end. Let's talk David Njoku, who's kind of like the Mike Evans of tight ends. Like every year, nobody really seems to be excited to draft this guy, and then every year he finishes as a top 10 tight end. Right now going as a tight end 9, despite having 3 straight seasons finishing as a top 8 tight end, and last year finishing as a tight end 4 in points per game. And now he gets reunited with his old buddy, Joe Flacco. And the last time these guys played together, David Njoku went off from weeks 14 until they got eliminated in the first round of the real life playoffs. David Njoku scored no fewer than 16 fantasy points in every single one of those games. From weeks 14 through 17 to finish the fantasy season that year, he was a tight end 1. And he wasn't just barely the tight end 1. He beat tight end 2 Evan Ingram by 4.6 fantasy points per game. Like a massive difference between him and every other tight end. This is great for David Njoku. The Browns are going to be terrible. They're going to be losing every game. Flacco's going to be throwing it 40 plus times a game. Sure, they're not all going to go to David Njoku. Jerry Jeudy will get his share. We like Tillman. But David Njoku's going to get enough. And he's a great receiving tight end. And he's great after the catch. Not to mention he's a red zone threat. David Njoku is once again going to be a top 8, maybe even a top 5 tight end this year that you're getting outside the top 8 tight ends that nobody in your league wants to draft for some reason. Just wait on tight end. Let everybody else, fight for Brock Bowers's, the Trey McBrides, the Kittles, the Hawks, whoever, and just get David Njoku later and let everybody else see how wrong they were at the end of the season when David Njoku is putting up big numbers week after week with Joe Flacco.
All right, I'm going to save my favorite one for last here. got to talk about the disrespect that continues for the number 1 draft pick, Cam Ward. All right, so basically what the community is saying is he's not worth drafting. I mean, he's going as the QB 22. You know, he's an afterthought basically in your 1 QB leagues, and you know, there's just no expectation here for him to have a good season. We just saw Jayden Daniels have an amazing rookie season, but everyone's like, yeah, he's no Jayden Daniels. Okay, so maybe you're right? He's not exactly the same. Didn't come away with a Heisman. He only finished 4th, even though he threw for 500 more yards than Jayden Daniels in college in his last season. Look, sure, he doesn't run as much. I get that. He can run, but he's more strategic about it. He wants to throw it down the field. But let me just say, though, even if the rushing numbers aren't quite the same as Jayden Daniels, I don't see why people are just assuming Cam Ward will do nothing in his rookie season. I mean, sure, the Titans are bad. That's why they got the number 1 pick. But honestly, if you take a hard look at this roster, it is not that different at all from what Washington had last year. In fact, it's probably better in terms of skill players, and I'm not exaggerating here, right? Calvin Ridley, basically Terry McLaurin, very similar type of players, okay? So got 1 elite wideout. Remember what Washington and what Jayden Daniels did with the receiving core last year of guys like Olamide Zaccheaus, who, by the way, in case you didn't know, was the number 2 receiver for Washington last year. All right, in terms of receptions by wide receivers, it was McLaurin, there was Zaccheaus, Noah Brown, and Dyami Brown. That was his skill players he had to throw to. Lead running back is Brian Robinson, who they love so much that they just traded him for like a late round pick. Tennessee has, at the very least, besides Ridley, they got a veteran, Tyler Lockett. They got some exciting rookies with Ayo Minor, who I really like, DK and Restrepo, Cam Ward's buddy. Tony Pollard, I think, is probably a little bit better than B-Rob. So why can't Cam Ward put up similar numbers passing? And I think he can have a really surprisingly good year. And I'm just shocked that people are going to be shocked that the number 1 pick and the best quarterback by far in this class might actually be good. Don't forget all the other draft strategy we have. Got still time left to crush your draft. Check out this playlist for everything you need.